Hello and welcome to our new edition of Charity Pulse. I'm James Saunders. I'm a partner at Moore Kingston Smith Accountants. And with me today, as ever, Catherine Rostromji, Head of Charities at Shakespeare Martineau, and Charles Mesquita from Quilter Cheviot, Charities Director and General All-Round Guru. There's quite a lot to rattle through this week. The first one actually is a question that I had in the last couple of weeks, which was, can charities pay bonuses to their executives for performance or any other reason? Which is an interesting question. Obviously, the charity sector definitely doesn't want to be associated with nasty bonus grabbing types that might or might not have had a bit of a bad rep in the recent past. But equally, performance-related pay is a perfectly viable way of making sure that people get what they deserve in a positive way for charity execs as much as anyone else. So that was the first question. Catherine, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think?
It's an interesting one. When I first raised it, James, I was quite thinking, oh, this is not good. This doesn't fit with the sector. It's not what we see. But actually, then I was reflecting on it more, that it can be really useful for, particularly, I would say, for chief execs to have a very focused set of objectives and targets that they need to direct the organisation to. And I could see, well, that is useful actually to put skin in the game and say, well, and there is a bonus, and it might be split in a number of different ways to measure it. But I could see actually in some circumstances, it could be really useful. I think it gives the best outcome for the charity overall. Therefore, it's not necessarily in itself a bad thing. But I suppose where it's used as a blunt tool, I think that's the wrong motivation. And I think that could encourage some bad behaviours possibly if it's more unscrupulous people or just not managed properly.
Yeah, I mean, we do see some bonus schemes, slightly more than might be expected given the adverse perception that they can have in the non-profit sector in particular. They can be commercial operations in a charity wrapper. So maybe they're not particularly concerned about public perception. More commonly, and I think probably of more relevance, that if they are in evidence, they are linked to non-financial KPIs or metrics, which indicate the success. So they're linked to performance and, importantly, the charity's objectives, not necessarily just financial results or something that isn't really core to the charity. So the difficulty really comes about when bonus schemes are linked to financial results rather than those non-financial metrics. And the key element, I think, really, is that the Charity Commission has generally been of the view that bonuses ultimately need to serve beneficiaries. So and it doesn't necessarily easily tie in with that simple achievement of financial results or targets. Charles, what about you?
So I think you have to take a step back because, of course, bonuses is part of total remuneration package. And I think one of the problems here is that what is a fair wage? And there is a sort of slight expectation that people working in the charity sector should be it's slightly that not paid as well as other people, and I think there needs to be something that is looking at general people's total remuneration on a comparable basis, but not just within the charity sector. So if you're running an organization with 20 people looking at other organizations that could be in the public sector or in the private sector similar, and having a look at the commonality across that. So I think we need to sort of slightly get away with this expectation that anybody working within the charity sector doesn't deserve to have a fair wage. I think that's the first really important thing. And the problem is the press, of course, always focus on the outliers, as does everybody else. And we only ever hear comments about those that are on extraordinary height. But they're outliers for reasons, because they're exceptional circumstances. Whether their salaries are right or wrong, I'm not making any comment on that. But I think we need to look at the main, not at the outliers. Interestingly, on bonuses, from a trustee's perspective, for the organizations I've been involved in, when we've talked to staff, most of them haven't wanted bonuses because they don't like the uncertainty that comes with it. Where we have applied bonuses, we've done it very much so on the basis that it's exceptional. We don't do it every year. And in fact, we've just awarded our chief executive and a member of staff a bonus this year. And we made, when we were having the discussion in the trustee meeting, we started with a figure, and I said, actually, no, we need to make this figure higher, because actually it was exceptional circumstances. And the exceptional circumstances were that the costs had been reduced by 7 or 8% of the administration, and that actually they had delivered on a strategy, and had done a fantastic job. But we haven't paid them a bonus the 3 prior years. So actually it was an exception, and that they were very grateful for it. So I think there are ways and means of doing it. But I think certainly from my experience, most people in the sector don't particularly like having bonuses. It's not as you would have in the city, which is a sort of normal part of your remuneration package.
Yeah. So the danger really, I think, is that it actually creates the wrong kind of culture, doesn't it? Really, that it's rewarding cost cutting. I mean, it's interesting you said cost cutting, Charles, rather than, because that is a financial. I know it's not a financial KPI, if you like, because you weren't measuring them against a target, and it was a result. But how would, if I was to say to you, well, you're rewarding them for financial success, if you like, rather than charity success, core objective success.
Yeah, maybe sorry, I've probably been a little misleading there. But so the reason we were discussing giving them a bonus was because they'd actually delivered on a very, very significant change in strategy of the way we were doing things, and they had done it really, really well in a very tight time frame and had gone the extra mile. The fact that we had also managed to reduce our costs from somewhere in the region of 18% down to 12%, and it's a grant maker, so there's a very good reason for it, is that we had quite a lot of capacity in the budget that we were not expecting, which had been, which we were spending on our beneficiaries. So it actually gave us quite a lot of latitude from a financial basis to be able to give a bonus.
Okay. You pointed us actually to one of those TED Talks by a guy called Dan Pallotta, Charles, who's, and it's American, and it won't tie in with the Charity Commission thinking at all. But it is very interesting to listen to the guy talk about, charities breaking the shackles, breaking the, being a bit less careful about these sort of things, and making them more commercial. Of course, I understand the argument that if you make them more commercial, you lose the essence of the charity in the first place. But there must be, somewhere a happy medium, and indeed it is. These things are happening, so well worth a think. Catherine, any final thoughts on that?
No, I think it's exactly that, James. I think it's worth a think. I think rather than the knee jerk might be no, absolutely not. But I think rather than just being open to it and maybe just having a read round and think about how it could be made to work, and it can encourage good behaviours, I think, rather than as always thinking it's a negative.
Yeah. Good. Okay. In terms of other charity news, I think I had to say that it's been a bit quiet recently, and I wonder if that's to do with the general election that's going on right now, and perhaps people are a bit reticent to go mad on news stories. There was one, and Catherine, again, this is one I'll probably come to you first on, but there's been one. There was a report of a charity receiving a mysterious £1,000 donation. And indeed, I think this is one of a few that have come up recently where there's been some mystery donations made to charities. A case of £20 notes, I think. So really, I just wondered about the whole, possible tainted donation source of funds question, where anonymous donations are received. I mean, this was like only £1,000, so it's not an absolute mind bender, but equally, what if there were some bigger ones? Where do you draw the line somewhere? What's your position on this?
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because I saw the headline saying mysterious donation, but as you've just said, actually it was an anonymous donation, and I could entirely see why somebody might want to make a cash anonymous donation, so they are not pestered to death to make further donations, to leave a gift in your will, to support other projects where you actually want your anonymity. And I think that's something now, the way that donations are so regulated, it's not possible to do that. But here I was also thinking, what is the risk to the charity of saying, look, we didn't ask for this, we didn't put a sign out saying deliver your used dodgy cash here, it's something that was unexpected. What are they supposed to do? return it to the police and say we don't know where this came from. And as we're saying, it was £1,000. I do wonder if the amount was £50,000. Would we be saying, well, this sounds a bit more? But even then, I think it's beyond their control. What can they do? And even if further down the line it turns out the donor was Genghis Khan, I mean, again, they can't prevent that. That didn't make it an error on their part to accept the donation in good faith and spend it on the charity's purposes. So I was just a bit less concerned about the whole kind of, you could disappear, in just a vortex of what about this, what about that, the risk of the other. And I just think, what's the real risk? And to me, this seemed quite low, really.
Interesting, really. I've seen boards get themselves tangled up in real knots, and being quite, some serious opposition from different parties about whether the donation should be received from X, Y, and Z because they're associated with ABC, who's associated with DEF. Do you know what I mean? You follow a tangled path along to any sort of problem, can't you, Charles?
I think it's very interesting, isn't it? Because the chair of the Charity Commission has been very robust and vocal on charities should be accepting unless there's a very good reason not to. I mean, I'm just suddenly thinking about, okay, fine, so you've got the £1,000 anonymous, but actually I'm just thinking about legacies. So we get legacies from people. Do we actually ever go and look at where their source of funds came from? I don't know. I'm going to go back and ask the question, but because you can get different sizes of money. If somebody gives it to you and they're alive, you probably would check in. And I think it's a really good question about at what point do you start? Is that 10 grand? Is that 20 grand? Is that 50 grand? What is the number? Again, I'm not sure I know the answer. Probably should do for the charities I'm involved with. But legacies, I'm not sure how much due diligence we do. Probably quite a good thing in some cases, maybe. Don't know. I think it's fundamentally charities should accept money because of what they're going to be able to do with it. I do think we can get lost down in rabbit holes if we're not careful.
Okay. The election is going on right now. Charities would be an essential partner of a Labour government, Shadow Minister pledges. This is a third sector story and others from this week. Have we faith that any new government is going to look at the charity sector any differently? What do we think, Catherine?
I think I am more optimistic that yes, a new government would. I think they have put more effort into trying to understand the sector, trying to educate themselves about what the sector is made up of, trying to make sure they're included. So I don't dispute they would be essential. I suppose it's the partner. Is that an equal partner? Is that a silent partner? Is that a teeny tiny partner that doesn't get to argue back? So I think in general, yes, I think there would be more involvement under a new government, which can only be a good thing. But I suppose it is still for the sector to articulate what it is they do and the value that they bring.
I read the manifesto. Well, I got the manifestos up on screen and did a word search to find out who said the word charity. The Labour Party didn't mention the word charity or charities once in their manifesto. It does talk about, I think, society and maybe civil society and that sort of thing. So, and they said, didn't they? Yeah, and charities would be an essential partner, and I think there was more mention of the words civil society. Maybe it wasn't third sector, but it was that civil sector, maybe. So there obviously is a commitment there, and as you said, we talked about before, the Labour Party has been making overtures, or at least talking to the charity sector over the last year or so. Charles, your thoughts?
I'm bit like Catherine. I'm sort of optimistically hopeful that whichever government gets in, there will be a better relationship with the sector, and there could be some improvements on some fairly simple things. The bits that amuse me, I suppose, are one, the unfunded commitments, which every manifesto seems to be full of, some more so than others. And the other thing is around the commitment to the environment. Now we're in the world of investment, we're seeing a lot of that going on, a debate about it. And I'm sort of slightly thinking, if you've got a lot of these manifestos are watering down on that, their commitments to it. So anybody who owns government bonds, what's their attitude towards that and the connectivity to their responsible policies as far as that is going, and their commitment to climate change? So I'm, you know, I mean, these things are very complex, but I do look at these things and sort of have a wry smile on my face.
Okay, good. Right, Charles, you were at the CFG conference yesterday. Any particular talking points or matters that you want that were really important in the day?
I have to say the closing plenary speech from Samuel Kasumu, I hope I've pronounced his name correctly, who's a social entrepreneur and worked as a special advisor with Boris Johnson, was absolutely fantastic and really interesting. So the most senior black special advisor in government. And I have to say, I hope he will go back into government at some point, because he seemed to have a lot to say. No, the only, well, two things I'd say. One is that the conference was absolutely at capacity. I think 700 delegates. It, having been going to the CFG conference for probably the last 20 years, it's really good to see how it's broadened out. So it used to be originally just finance directors, and it's now around finance managers. It's a great opportunity for them to use it, one, educational, but also to meet other people and get to know. The one thing I picked up is that that there is going to be a charity investment governance code coming out after the election for consultation, and then to be published in the autumn. I did pick up 72 pages of the document. I wonder what you guys thought about that.
It's
I
as
think
well
there's
this is a podcast, I think, isn't it? Just
Yeah,
not to see the faces we're pulling. Oh my Lord. Is there any
I think-
need for it? Where's you know, what's driving it? Why do we need it? What would it achieve? It's a no from me, if in case anyone can't sense, but yes.
Yeah, and it's a groan emoji for me. Another further help governance check. I'm not quite sure we needed that much detail, do we? I mean, you guys know what you're doing, investment managers and investment committees.
Well, it was, but it's interesting because it was put together by non-investment managers. So this was most of them, I think, were sort of large grant makers were involved. I mean, they have sort of done a reasonably wide thing, but we have seen this before, because I think Akivo did something, you know, 15 years ago, and that really didn't get anywhere. I mean, I'm going to reserve judgment until I read it, because I think it would be unfair to comment before that. But I am sort of slightly struggling of why it's needed if we've got CC14. But there were some comments from people about CC14 has now been dumbed down, I think is what, and it's much shorter. I think that's a really unfair criticism, because I think the Charity Commission has done a fantastic job with CC14, which is a guide for investment matters for charities. And I think they have put it into plain language, and I think they have done a very good job of explaining about people's legal duties and what the Commission expects when it comes to investment.
Okay.
I would agree. And I think they've made it principles based. They've not tried to cover every possible circumstance. They've said these are the principles you interpret and apply it to your situation. That's why it's shorter, as it should be. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Any news story that which I only just picked up this morning, was St John's Ambulance have published their financial results for 2023, and gosh, they look painful. I mean, they clearly, coming out of COVID, I think you know, they reported a £17 million deficit for last year, for the 23 year. Yeah, it's a big loss. Free reserves down by a huge chunk. So they're under they report they're under a major restructuring program that, you know, that's gone on. That's part of the spend. But all I would say is obviously one of the great hero charities of our nation, really, St John's Ambulance. So support them if you can, and let's hope that they get back on the right course, financially at least, for the next year or so. I've got one other point, which is a bit of a flag for people. In my other life outside of videos, as a charity audit partner, with a lot of clients are receiving HMRC demands for tax returns for 2020, 2021, very backdated, very irregular, very surprising, really, given the timescales. And the HMRC letters are saying, because no previous tax return has been submitted, they're just simply taking the income level of the charity and taxing it at 20%. So there's some very large tax figures coming through being demanded, along with penalties and interest as well. So It's slightly surprising. It's reasonably easily fixable as long as you submit the returns promptly. The HMRC then seem to resolve it all themselves. But it's a very strange situation to come to see. And I would just stress to any charities that do get these, very, very odd HMRC demands for tax returns from 4, 5, 6 years ago, however long it is, don't be too scared. Hopefully it all gets resolved, but just watch out for these as they come through.
James, just for clarity for people who don't deal with, they're obviously dealing with their annual returns, but how often do charities actually get, and why does the HMRC send out a tax return to a charity?
Yeah. It's an interesting one, really. No one really knows. There's probably an algorithm generally speaking, charities should, as companies, they should return, the rule is they do make tax returns. Then they get exemptions given to them if HMRC think they warrant an exemption. If it's nil returns every year and they're doing something that is completely non-taxable, there's no doubt about it. Very, very, very straight down the line charities usually get exempted from doing them and can go for years without doing them. If you've got a trading sub and you've got any trading income, you're probably going to fall foul of them, as it were. You're probably not going to get the exemption. If you do any actual trading in your charity, probably not. If you've got any sort of group complex group structure, anything like that, that sort of those sort of that will change the risk profile or that algorithm that HMRC uses. But the worry here is that they date to periods so long ago that it's whether it's COVID and it's all they didn't do them after the COVID period. I just don't know. That's been someone's guessed that, but just watch out for that because you only get one notification from HMRC, and if you miss it, you'll get a reminder. But if you miss it, and your accountants aren't set up as agents, it is very easy for them to suddenly appear 18 months later and say, look, you didn't do what we asked you to. Well, we didn't get the letter. That's, it's not really HMRC's fault, they would say. So watch out. It's a registered address it goes to. You just got to be very careful about these correspondences.
So from what you're saying is that periodically HMRC will send out a tax return just to validate that a charity still remains exempt from paying tax.
Yes, it's quite common for it to be a 3-year exemption or 5-year exemption period, and then suddenly, they'll get a demand for a new one. It's not necessarily something to be worried about. It's just that they don't exempt everyone charities forever.
But if you were a trustee and you're on the Charity Commission register and recognised by the Charity Commission as a charity, you would automatically assume that, but you can't make that assumption, can you?
No. The automatic assumption is that you do make a tax return as a company, because every company has to. It's an exemption that HMRC grants, so that's why you've got to be very careful and very observant about it, and don't assume that that assumption charities don't pay tax. Well, that's completely false, and you've got to be very careful. Okay, I think that's all we've got time for today. We'll run through a significant number of items. Thank you both for your contributions. As always, if you've got any questions, do email us or tweet or X or Facebook or whatever. Otherwise, I hope you're all okay and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.